Hey y'all, it's Kate from the Literary Apothecary and welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing a series review. I'm going to be reviewing a series that I'm caught up to date on, but we still have like 6 books left in this series. But I felt like this was a good time to do this because I am caught up. I just spoke with the author on our Self-Pub Sunday, the Saturday edition. If that gives you an idea of what we're talking about today. That is the Nightmareland Chronicles series by Daniel Barnett. I think it's also a good time to talk about this series because it's going to be a little bit before we get the next set of books. I think he's aiming for the audiobooks for the first 6 books to come out sometime next year, and then the next set of books to come out the year after that in 2025. So stay tuned in 2025 for more reactions to Nightmareland Chronicles series. But this series was so good. Y'all have heard me on my weekly reading vlogs talking about this series. I can't say enough good things about the Nightmareland Chronicles series. This is a post-apocalyptic horror series, but it's also so much more than just that. You hear that and you have very specific images in your mind, or at least I do. But Nightmareland Chronicles series is so much more. Like I said, we currently have 6 books in the series, and the last book that was just released, I believe last year, is Lily. That's book 6. Daniel is on, I think, the second draft of book 7. Like I said, we'll get those out in a few years once he gets more under his belt. I think he's aiming for 12 as the goal for total in this series. So we're about halfway now, and I am loving it. We start out with Nightfall, which is the first book in the series, and it's aptly named because it starts with essentially the death of the sun. We get this eternal night that sits over this land, and the first 2 sentences completely hooked me with his hard-hitting, beautiful prose. This is how the entire series starts, and it wowed me so much that as I was trying to explain it to John, I realized my words weren't doing it justice, and I just read off these 2 sentences to him. This is how Nightfall starts in the Nightmareland Chronicles series. Tomorrow died on the last morning of May. There were those who saw it happen, who watched the shadow fall, who felt the chop of the guillotine as the world lost its head. And I already have goosebumps just reading those 2 sentences. This writing is just so beautiful, so descriptive that you can't help but visualize and feel everything that's going on. The series, the Nightmareland Chronicles series, follows essentially one man's journey to reach his estranged daughter in an eternal night. So our main character, John Hawthorne, is trying to travel across the country essentially to get to his daughter on the East Coast. I want to say up in Maine. And she, is an estranged daughter, but as night falls, she leaves a message on his answering machine saying, "I need your help, Daddy, come. And so he immediately sets off on this journey. We get all these different characters along the way who I absolutely love. My favorite character so far in the series is by far Marcos, who is this deaf kid, and he is the heart of this series. He is so lovable that you can't help but love him, and I can't wait to get more of Marcos coming up. My average CAWPILE score, so I took all of the CAWPILE scores for the first 6 books and I averaged them out. I added them and divided by 6, and I got a 9.02, which gives me 5 stars. That tells you how much I love this series so far. My favorite books, now if I were to just think of my favorite book off the top of my head, I would say Lily, which is book 6 and the latest book in the series. Just something about Lily, everything wraps up together. You get all of these different storylines coming together, different character growth, development, everything is just so beautiful in Lily. But when I went back and looked at the CAWPILE ratings, we actually had a tie for 3 different books that had the same high score. That's Lullaby, which is book 2, Sleepwalking, which is book 3, and Lily. So in Lullaby, we kind of get an extension of book 1 and some character development with some of our main characters. Sleepwalking kind of takes that one step further and starts to kind of explain a little bit what's actually happening here. And then we get Lily, where, like I said, everything just starts to come together. Some of our storylines start to come together, our plot development comes together, character development, just everything just comes together so smoothly in Lily. I can't help but love that book. My least favorite, although I hate saying that because I still absolutely loved it. It wasn't like I didn't like it at all. I still gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. That's Flashlighters, which I think, if I remember correctly, is book 4. And the only reason why this one was lower than the others is because there were some things that happened in this book that were a little bit too crazy for me. But if you love the crazy macabre, then you would love Flashlighters. I've got some of my favorite quotes from the Nightmareland Chronicles series. This is kind of like a top 6. So there's 6 quotes here. Hang with me because these are just absolutely beautiful quotes. So in addition to the first 2 sentences in the series that I already read off to you, we've got 2 quotes from Sleepwalking. And you can't have a dream like that without leaving all the bad stuff behind. Your nightmares have to go to somewhere. And that quote basically sums up the book and what's happening in Sleepwalking. Our second quote from Sleepwalking says, "Sometimes hurting is the only way to feel okay." And that quote just hit me to my core. If you've ever been through depression, you know exactly what it's talking about. And that was just such a hard-hitting quote. Next up, we have 2 quotes from City of Blood. And what scared a lot of people, maybe even most people, was not the lurid or the grotesque, but the intangible, the spiritual, failing to live up to something, falling short of an ideal. And that quote is so true. When you ask people what they're truly most afraid of in life, it's something as dying alone, not falling in love, disappointing my parents or someone, things like that, ideals in life. That is the most frightful, falling short of those ideals. Our second quote from City of Blood just is another one that just hit me to my core and brought instant tears to my eyes when I read it. It is exactly how I feel kind of in life. Kind of, especially when I'm at my lowest, what I pray for. And now I'm already getting emotional before I read it. So here we go. Let's try to do this without crying. "If you leave me one thing in this world, let it be love." That quote, let's just pause there for a second. That quote is the one quote that has stayed with me the most out of this entire series. Our last 2 quotes are from Lily, which of course is book 6, and these 2 are also quotes that have stayed with me throughout. "All the best stories have hope," and that's what Nightmareland Chronicles is all about. It is a horror series, it's a post-apocalyptic series, it's an epic series. At the bottom line, it's a series about hope. In the darkest of dark, there is still hope, and Marcos brings that hope to this story. And our last quote that I have is, of course, a quote about stories. All this time I've been talking about stories, and now we have a quote about stories. "It had been a good story, and when you found a good story, you carried it with you." And this quote is actually, if I remember correctly, Marcos talking about the Count of Monte Cristo, which he read in this book and absolutely ate up and loved every minute of it and took it with him and just had that be a part of him. So that is my series review for Nightmareland Chronicles series. Of course, this is only up to book 6, which is where we're at right now with this series. 5 out of 5 stars so far. I can't wait to see what Daniel Barnett has for us in the last 6 books of this series. I am ready for it. I can't wait for it, and I hope maybe I can get an early copy once he's ready for the world to see it, because I need to know what happens with our characters going forward. If you have read the Nightmareland Chronicles series, let me know in the comments below who's your favorite character, what's your favorite book in the series, and what are you looking forward to the most in the next book, book 7. As always, my Patreon and my Discord information will be in the description below. Keep reading, and I love y'all to the moon and back. Bye.